This is Nathan from RunDreamAchieve.com. Today's topic, we're going to be discussing marathon running and hitting the wall. And I want to tell you from experience that you do not have to experience what it feels like to hit the wall. I have definitely dealt with it over the years as a marathon runner. When I ran 2:19:35 for the marathon, I did not hit a wall. When I ran 2:26:42 for the marathon in Indianapolis a few years after I ran that 2:19, I did not hit a wall. But I've had the experience of hitting the so-called wall many times in my marathons, and it was not until I started to really realize what was going wrong and why that was occurring. It wasn't until after I learned from those mistakes that I started running faster over the 26.2 or 42.2 kilometers. The problem is a lot of times we're racing improperly. We're running way too fast, too aggressively early on in the race, and we run out of glycogen. We also are running too aggressively, and we build up too much lactic acid. A lot of times runners that are experiencing the wall is a lot of times because they've just simply run out of glycogen. They've run out of glucose, and at any given time we only have about 17 to 1800 calories of carbohydrate build up in our bloodstream, in our bodies. But we do have a large amount of fat storage, and that is what we need to start relying on in the marathon distance. You need to rely more on what you have more of and rely less of what you have much less of, and focus on those carbohydrate storage, especially in the last 10 kilometers of your marathon. If you've trained well below goal marathon race pace often enough, then that pace that you're trying to hit is going to become much more efficient, and you're going to be able to run throughout the race at that pace because you've spent time, whether that's doing the track sessions where you're training at your VO2 max. We do one VO2 max workout per week. Examples of that are, any type of speed session where you're really focusing on paces that are closer down toward your 1 mile to 5K to 10K race pace rather than running at marathon race pace. So if, say, for example, your goal is to run under 3 hours for the marathon, you need to get accustomed to running at 6:52 per mile pace or 4 minutes and 16 seconds per kilometer pace. So doing mile repeats closer to around 5:45 to 5:50 per mile, or doing repeat kilometers well under 4 hours or 4 minutes for each kilometer is going to make that goal marathon race pace feel easier and get you to a point where you're not relying so much on carbohydrates in your race and you're relying more on fat storage. So again, if you run out of glycogen in a marathon, you're going to hit the wall, the so-called wall, because you've run out of what you have much less of. And again, it's a combination of a lot of things that cause us as marathoners to hit the wall. Like I mentioned before, improper pacing, running far too aggressively too soon will cause you just to drastically drop off pace and get you to a point where you're not running at race pace, and you're slowing down, and your muscle functioning is not, your muscles aren't working as efficiently as they possibly can in the race. I've had other races where everything just went perfectly. Like I said, when I ran 2:19:35 at the 2007 California International Marathon, I actually went through the half marathon in 1:07:09, which was only 3 seconds slower than my half marathon PR of 1:07:06. So I was very fit anaerobically. I had done the aerobic work, the anaerobic work, but I was also hydrating very well in the race. And that's another big reason why we hit the wall. A lot of athletes are not drinking sufficient, they're not taking enough sufficient fluids, they're not taking enough calories in the race. So that's why I always preach this over and over again. Make sure you put a gel packet in the left side of your shorts and in the right side of your shorts. And then take another gel right around mile 17 or 18, which is most oftentimes where marathon races have volunteers out there giving out those gels at that particular point in the race, because it's usually right around mile 17 or 18 that marathoners start really struggling hard mentally as well as physiologically. because again, we burn about 100 calories per mile, and again, we usually only have around 17 to 1800 calories of carbohydrate stored in our bodies at any given time. So when you are running in a marathon and you're going at all-out efforts, just about, if you want to take in those calories at around that point, and preferably prior to mile 17 or 18, because again, if you're taking in 3 gels in a marathon race, you're getting anywhere from 300 to 450 additional calories in your bloodstream immediately, on top of taking in either water or some form of electrolyte drink during the race. Those calories will definitely help you get to the finish line, and if you've done the work properly and you've paced yourself properly in the race, it will help you get to the finish line in record time. Hitting the wall in the marathon distance is definitely not a good feeling whatsoever. You can be in phenomenal anaerobic and aerobic shape, highly motivated, but when you hit the wall and you run out of glycogen, you run out of glucose in the marathon, which is a sugar event, it doesn't matter how much motivation you have or how much work you've put in. If you get to that point, you're going to have a very difficult time finishing the race at record pace. And that is why I always stress the importance of recovery, making sure that you're taking those easy days easy and pushing your body to the limit physiologically and as well as mentally in training, and training at paces that are much faster than goal race pace, so that you can get very comfortable at running at that goal race pace that you have in mind for the marathon distance. You do not have to experience hitting a wall, but you have to do all the fundamentals correctly to get it right. And again, you don't play a melody without goofing it up over and over again. You don't just get good at anything without repetition and doing it and learning from your mistakes. And an entrepreneur by the name of Bill Britt said it best. He said, every master was once a disaster. And we all have to experience what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong in the marathon distance to get it right. To not hit the wall in the marathon, there's a lot of things you absolutely have to keep in mind. The first thing is start practicing hydrating better in training, and get accustomed to finding out how much fluid intake your stomach can take while you're doing those long runs. You don't want to just do long runs in training without taking in any fluid whatsoever. It's very important to hydrate well, to start doing those faster long runs that I talk about, alternating a faster, harder long run one weekend followed by jogging, an easy, relaxed jog long run the following weekend. All of my training programs and running courses on RunDreamAchieve.com are focused on this. We also focus on heart rate monitor training. You want to train at the proper intensity for a long enough period of time so that, again, you're teaching the body to burn fat at race pace and conserve what you have less of, which is carbohydrates. So you want to call upon what you have less of in the latter stages of your marathon and not use all that up in the early stages of your marathon, so you don't have to hit that wall. But again, it does come with time. It comes with how, learning from what you've done wrong in the past. I learned from my own mistakes that I was running my long runs far too slow, and I was trying to run at paces in the marathon that I was not prepared properly enough at that period of time in my career, that I still needed more time and effort and focus to get to a point where I could break 2 hours and 20 minutes for the marathon. And like I said, I started running marathons in 2002. My debut was at the New York City Marathon. I ran 2 hours, 43 minutes and 36 seconds. But I started running in 1992. So I ran from 1992 all the way up and ran my personal best for the marathon of 2 hours, 19 minutes and 35 seconds in 2007. So consistent, persistent action on your part is going to make the difference, and is going to be the deciding factor on how strong and how prepared and how motivated you are and committed you are to excel in this event. and get to a point where you're not hitting the wall. It's a psychological barrier as well. You have to be strong mentally in the marathon. You have to visualize yourself over and over again on a daily basis doing something, running a time, or seeing yourself getting across the finish line and finishing your marathon, if that's your goal of just starting and finishing a marathon. But if it's a specific time, you have to visualize yourself over and over in repetition. Train your subconscious mind to do what it is that you're wanting your body and your mind to do. And that's what I was doing over the years. I continued to visualize myself getting across the finish line with 2 hours, 21 minutes, and 59 seconds on the clock. Because back in 2007, the USA Track and Field Olympic Trials B standard time was 2 hours, 22 minutes flat. So that was my goal. But I was still a 2:43:36 marathoner. So I had to learn what it was that the best marathoners do and study and emulate their efforts. And that's one of the things I always continue to preach here on the channel and on RunDreamAchieve.com as well. Study what successful people do. Find out, in your case, you're wanting to run a marathon and not hit that wall. So study what are these top marathoners doing to not have to hit that wall and not have to experience what it feels like to deal with that. Again, train your body to burn fat at faster paces. That means longer tempo runs and spend a longer duration training at your anaerobic threshold, which is the point right where lactic acid starts to build up in the bloodstream. And you want to spend a longer period of time training at that effort because you're going to be racing pretty much at your anaerobic threshold. So spend time doing that. Don't run every single weekend long, slow, and easy for your long runs. This is a marathon you're training for. It's not a 5K or a mile or a mile on the track. You have to get accustomed to running for long periods of time and being uncomfortable for longer periods of time to get that race pace to feel more in control, where you're not struggling so much and you're not hurting as much mentally as well as physically. It's going to be difficult in the marathon regardless how fit you are or how properly you've set up your training, but you can minimize the effects of that lactic acid buildup in your bloodstream if you've trained properly, if you've conserved and you've trained very hard anaerobically, you've paid attention to your taper. That's another big thing. If you've tapered correctly in going to your marathon, I focus on a 10-day taper rather than a 3-week taper in my training plans and running courses on RunDreamAchieve.com. I don't want you as athletes starting to drop your volume and your intensity too far out. I want you to continue to remind your legs of what you're training them to do up until about 10 days out from your marathon. And then you want to significantly drop your volume and your intensity and start to rest. Because again, all the benefits that from your hard anaerobic training the results from that training is going to happen in the rest period of your preparation. So again, marathon running and hitting the wall, to offset having to hit that wall, you want to spend longer, faster paced long runs, spend more time and a longer duration doing longer tempo runs, your anaerobic threshold runs. Get that tempo run out to around 16 kilometers to around 25 kilometers in length, or longer. When I was training for the marathon, I would get my tempo runs out to around 15 miles, right around there, 16 miles, and then focus on, and at your tempo effort, you're running right around, and it varies from athlete to athlete, but it's going to be right around 15 seconds slower than goal race pace. But training at that particular effort, you can spend a long period of time training at your anaerobic threshold. It's not like you're training, when you're running at VO2 max effort, you can only spend a few seconds to a few minutes at those efforts. But those are very critical too, because again, you're training at sprint paces that are so fast, you can't clear that lactic acid faster than it's building up. So if you're doing a combination of that, running your long runs at a faster clip for a longer period of time and varying up the paces of your long runs and not just making it one slow, steady effort every single weekend, that is going to make you very well prepared to run the marathon from start to finish at a effective pace and get you to the finish line with a record time on the clock. Okay? Pay attention to I'm telling you right now, pay attention to your hydration practices in training, and that way you can test how much fluid your stomach can take. And then when you get to the race, you don't have to experience, either getting a cramp, which can really ruin a marathon time as well, and ensuring that you're hydrating well in the race. Big mistake marathoners make is they sip rather than drink in their race. I've made that mistake, and it cost me numerous times running at, finishing in marathon times that were not up to my capability because I neglected that. I was sipping. I was thinking that slowing down just a little bit in the race at one of these, at the aid stations to get drinks would slow down my overall finish time, when that cost me several minutes because I didn't either stop or briefly stop to drink a couple Dixie cups and instead just kept running by those aid stations. Do not neglect that. Hydration is absolutely essential in a marathon. Taking in enough calories in your marathon is absolutely essential if you want to continue to hold that effort. And again, to intake those calories in your race, especially if it's hot, you must definitely want to hydrate well and make sure that you're taking in those calories. Your body will thank you for it. You will get to the finish line without hitting a wall because, again, you've trained well below goal race pace in training. You've extended the amount of time you're training at your anaerobic threshold in training. You've paced yourself properly in the race. You haven't went too anaerobic and went and redlined too early in the race, and that you can finish and you can negative split that second half and be able to finish the second half of your race faster than you finished the first half of your race. Now, sometimes you're going to be in such great anaerobic shape, and you've done your homework in training that you'll do a positive split. In my case, I went 107.09, and then I came back with a 112.26 and ran 219.35. I don't know if I would have broke 220 if I would have went out in 112 on that particular day for the first half. I think in that particular race, my goal was to focus on running with the lead pack, and it was about a lead pack of about 7 Kenyans, a Russian, Canadian guy, and those particular athletes were the big reason why I was able to hold that particular pace for that distance. I was still at 5 minutes and 11 seconds per mile pace through the 20-mile mark, which we hit in an hour and 44 minutes and 5 seconds. That comes out to 52:02 for 10 miles twice, and then I still had another 6.2 miles, another 10 kilometers to race. So running with that group, get in with a group of runners that you're capable of running with. And sometimes if you're in phenomenal shape, you're just going to go for it. And you have to have that mental tenacity and drive to be willing to take those risks in the race, because taking those types of risks can ruin your race. But sometimes if you've trained properly and you've dropped down your volume and you've tapered correctly, sometimes taking those risks will create those dramatic rewards for you. In my case, it was huge. I'd run 50:54 for 10 miles, 107:06 for the half prior to that morning, but my personal best as of the start of the race that morning, prior to running 2:19:35, was 2 hours 40 minutes and 2 seconds. So my shorter distances, gave me an indication of what I could do, but it wasn't until I tapered down, I went for it, I stuck with that group of marathoners that were running at the paces that I was aiming for, and I took that risk, and I ended up running 2:19:35. So I hope this video, in terms of this idea of marathon running and hitting the wall, just know that you more than likely will have to experience it just to learn from what you did wrong, but you don't have to continue to make the same mistake over and over again. It's just about practicing training well below goal race pace. Do that 1 VO2 max workout per week. Get a plan, get a training plan, get a long-term plan in place so you know what you need to be doing on a daily, monthly, weekly basis, and start developing your plan and training at near or goal marathon race pace. Be patient with yourself. Do that 10-day taper rather than 3 weeks out. That I think will really help you and will ensure that you don't go into your marathon feeling fatigued and tired. You're going to feel more motivated and energized because you haven't started dropping your volume and your intensity too far out from your goal race. Continue to practice varying pace in your long runs. Alternate a faster pace long run, followed the next week by an easy, relaxed jog long run, so that you can recover from that workout as well as the VO2 max workout that you're doing each week. Pay attention to your easy recovery days. Make sure that you're jogging on those days because, like I said, you're going to need those easy recovery days because the hard sessions are going to take everything out of you mentally and physically. Do all of these things correctly and you will be a successful marathon runner. You're going to get to the start line in great shape, rested, and you're going to be able to sustain pace all the way from the start to the finish line and get to that finish line with the time that you are dreaming about on that clock. So I hope this video is helpful for you all. Leave a comment below if there's any other questions or concerns you have, and I will talk to you all in the next video.